Welcome, everybody. My name's Bud with Craft Portal. I'm here with Pulkit, or PK, as many of you who know him well call him as well. What's up, PK? How you doing, buddy?
What's up, Bud? Good to connect and good to be on this webinar.
Yes, great to have you with us too. We're really excited to go through this. So today, for everybody, we're going to be talking about closing the supply chain loop and connecting distributors with production and demand planning, and doing this through the lens of what the work we've done with Kona Brewing between PK and myself, the Craft Portal team, and the Beer 30 team, and what that looks like. So a little bit about me real quick as we get going. I'm Bud. I'm in charge of the sales on the Craft Portal side, and I come from a beer distribution background. It's one of the fun things I like to talk about is that, born and bred out of the industry for myself personally, and also for us as a business as a whole. PK shares the same thing, born and bred out of the industry too. So PK, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Pulkit Kagwal. I'm the founder and CEO of The Fifth Ingredient. We implement the brewery software system called Beer 30 and Bucha 30 as well. And so, yeah, my background is that I used to be an engineer at Ballast Point Brewing, focusing on packaging equipment. Started The Fifth Ingredient to do consulting for breweries, and then quickly realized that many breweries had ECOS, orchestrated beer, and yet we're still on paper logs, whiteboards, and spreadsheets for the brewing process side. And so Beer 30 was born, and now Beer 30, as we'll talk about here in a moment, is being used in many breweries around the world.
Love it. That's awesome. I didn't realize that you started it as consulting first and then bred into software.
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. Very similar background to Craft Portal. This is why we get along so well. So today, because Jennifer and Nathalie are not here with us just yet, we'll see them later. Want to introduce Jennifer Bush. She's the VP of Finance from Kona Brewing Hawai'i. And then Nathalie Carsley, I hope I'm saying that right. She's not here to correct me anyway. So she's the Director of Supply Chain of Kona Brewing Hawai'i as well. So we'll hear from those ladies in a little bit. So a little bit about us, Craft Portal as a whole. So what are we? We're a demand planning and ordering portal that is uniquely positioned between brewers and their distributor partners. A large part of our business is brewers. We got a big, deep bench inside of beverage alcohol as a total, but our sweet spot is for brewers. 3 million annual barrels are sold through the platform annually. So pretty good sized brewery when you look at us from a data structure. 2,000 active wholesalers are using this tool. It's a single sign-on. We'll talk more about that. 50 years of team experience between our whole team and the industry on both sides. We've got brewing experience on our team. We've got distribution experience. And really our claim to fame is that in the first 20 weeks, we want to cut your out of stock rate by 70% or more. So we all know that supply chain and out of stocks are an issue. We're some of the folks that help solve that. It leads to one simple way to change your business.
Nice. So then getting into the Beer 30 side of things, we're a grain to glass brewery data management system. And effectively, we have different bundles that people could use. There's Beer 30 Labs, which people use in conjunction with other ERP systems. And there's also Beer 30 Business that's really used for the entire end-to-end solution and being able to track all the different aspects that go into the actual brewery production side. So with that, it's very modular based on your brewery's needs that can go from raw material purchasing to the actual brew to package process and quality, to the sales and distribution side, accounting integration, and then material forecasting and demand planning. So as you can see, lots of different ways to utilize Beer 30 based on what's best for your brewery. We are nearly 400 breweries in, from about 70 barrels brewed per year over to 60,000 barrels, which really gives a testament as to how modular it is and just the number of breweries and sizes of breweries that we work with, that we can make this work for somebody that's, extremely small and doing a couple hundred barrels all the way up to thousands and tens of thousands of barrels as well. With that, over 35% of our customers have switched from ECOS, orchestrated beer, and other softwares as well, which is pretty awesome to have that entire process be all dived into Beer 30. And one of the final things about this as well is that if a brewery is looking to sign on with us, they're usually up and running within about a 90-minute training session, which is pretty awesome. So this isn't going to take weeks to months to get going, and really focusing on a 90-minute brewing process training, and you're up and running.
Yeah, so a little bit about Kona. So Kona Brewing, y'all probably heard of Kona before. We're specifically talking about the headquarter brewery on the island, so out in Kailua Kona, Hawaii. So Kona nationally is brewed with a contract brewer here for the mainland stateside. And then this business, the Kona business that we're going to talk about today, brews in Hawaii and contract brews and ships stuff from the mainland out to the island. So that means that everything that they buy and ship and use locally arrives by boat. So that's either their contract brewing products, their raw materials, their package supplies, everything else. So for us, when we look at this, it's like really long supply chains and demand planning challenges. So a way and how they use data is really important to them. And once the product's even made, it's got to go on boats and go from island to island to island. So that's another unique challenge that they have to need to use data more accurately in their team.
And so with that, basically what happened here was that, as we'll hear from Jen and Natalie here in a bit, Kona Brewing Hawaii approached the Beer 30 crew and the GP crew to really look at a way to really start using their data much better, right? And with that, what Kona ended up doing was transitioning from orchestrated beer into Beer 30 business and GP analytics. And the use case that was presented to us was, is there a way for us to change the entire industry as a whole? And using Kona Brewing Hawaii as our test case, where we could actually use the data that's coming in from the actual brewing production side to feed sales orders that then ties them with GP-Analytics, make orders in GP-Analytics feed into Beer 30 and the accounting platforms, and then really use that data of production and depletions to feed right back into GP-Analytics' forecasting tools to get into our MRP, material resource planning. So really cool ways of actually having the Kona Brewing Hawaii team approach us with a problem of how can we actually use this data that is currently dislocated into one true story from start to finish. And it's going to be really interesting to dive into that together on this webinar and really explain how they were able to accomplish this and how you at your brewery can also do something similar with the combination of Beer 30 business and GP-Analytics.
So with that, a little bit about our agenda today, Pulkit. So we're going to be talking about what Craft Portal is, and then what Beer 30 is, and how do the two integrate together and work together. And then we'll have that interview with Jennifer and Natalie in a little bit as well, right? Am I missing anything?
Nope, we're good.
Awesome. So I'm going to go up. I'm up first. So what is Craft Portal? So the first thing that I always like to talk about with Craft Portal is it's not order only. It's also order and insight. So I'm going to pick on a couple like general business to business philosophies here where yes, everybody needs a way to place an order in a B2B world or business to business world where a manufacturer, like this example, can actually consume an order from a wholesaler. But for us in the beer world, like where are the insights? This isn't like t-shirts that can sit on a shelf indefinitely and have freshness and have no freshness problems. In the beer world, we've got static issues. We've got this much capacity, this much demand. We got to match capacity with demand, do supply chain planning with purchasing of raw materials and everything else, then the shipment planning on top of that. So we need to do order management, and we also need order insights in our view of the world. So how does that come to life? Well, the first thing that you need to do is you got to get your wholesalers to buy into it. So we're already streamlining orders from over 2,000 wholesalers across our network. So it means single sign-on. So the training hurdle is extremely low for wholesalers. It takes them 30 minutes to figure out how to use it. And because we're already connected with 60 plus suppliers managing those 3 million barrels of sales, your distributor's already using this. They already have a login. They're already using it with another supplier partner of ours. So that's a super easy hurdle to jump into or jump over. And then now when we get into the ordering, this is what the order screen looks like. And you can do a lot of things here. We're seeing forecasts of the velocity. We're seeing shipping via JB Hunt as a note. We're looking at our on-hand inventory reported from VIP. So there's a bunch of different things that are going on here in the background so that you can help manage your order, but also use data to make better insights. And one of the best examples that I have is when I go in to the actual zoom in a little bit on this, I want to focus on the far right side where we're looking at days on hand or projected net DOI. So what that's telling us is that on that first SKU, all the way across from forecasted velocity, projected on an inventory, and a pallet order of 4 pallets, that's giving us a net days of inventory of 28.34 days when this shipment arrives. So think about that a little bit more around, hey, I can now not only consume an order from a wholesaler in a strategic way, I can also start to use data to provide insights to myself, my own team, on how much needs to be on that order, and also to my wholesalers on what they need to be ordering too from a DOI and a quantity basis as well. So all of that is done dynamically, can be adjusted as needed. Why do we care so much about forecasts? This is why, because we can see out of stocks happening before they happen. So this is an actual client live on Craft Portal. And before they went live on us, their out of stock rate was running in the mid 25. So on the far left side of this graph. And once they got going, it took them about a month and a half to start to see, okay, how do I use these insights on the ordering tool to generate better order behavior from wholesalers? So over the time frame that we looked at this on a recurring like sales opportunity, this meant an easy almost $1 million sales upside just by lowering their out of stock rate from 25% to where it's settled now below 5%. So that 20% improvement is effectively a 20% sales growth. And for this brewer, that meant an additional $1 million in incremental revenue. So something that is in today's world, in today's economy, and how trends are, particularly in the craft beer world, could be very important to the bottom line of your business. And that's why we care so much about this, is why PKA and I work around the clock to make sure that this integration is up and running and working, because these insights can come to your business and they can change the way your business is operating. And using projected DOI, I want to give you a little bit more of an example of what this looks like. So walking everybody through here, this is how we look at the world. We're looking at current on inventory minus forecasted sales plus any orders in inbound, so any shipments out to wholesalers, for a net days of inventory position of 13 days on the current week. When I fast forward to the next week, I can see I'm depleting more inventory and no orders. So my 7 days of inventory, I've got a potential lost sales of 4 cases. And going further out to week 3, now I can see those lost cases are growing into 115 cases, because my wholesaler is actually going to start the week in week 3 with 0 in inventory projected. So this is where we can see, if we're looking at today, where we can see around the corner and we start to understand where those out of stocks are happening. And if we can reiterate this process out from week 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way out to 8. So when those wholesalers haven't started to place orders 6, 7 weeks out, I can see ahead of time which weeks are going to be short. And a little bit more of just a perspective of where Craft Portal sits in the whole value chain of how you run your business day in and day out. So on the far left side are all your distributors and retailers. That's where you're getting data from VIP reporting to. You're probably looking at the data through iDig. So you're seeing your placements, you're seeing your sales, you're seeing inventory at the wholesalers, and really getting a handle on what's going on in your business. And when we consume that information and generate forecasts and look at available inventory at wholesalers, that's where we get our insights, and we kind of sit between the two layers here. And then when we pass this information over to PK and he runs with it, that's where he layers on the information from VIP and from Craft Portal into the brew process planning and all the brewery inputs and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so let's get into what is Beer 30, right? So the key thing that I really want to emphasize here is that everything we just focused on was really on the sales side of things, right? And that's really what Craft Portal is solving, from the sales data problem and getting into what's happening from that part of the supply chain. However, when you start looking at it, from everything that Bud just spoke about, you need to be able to make sure that you have the beer on hand, right? And so that's where everything comes in from the actual brewing process and production side, where if you know exactly what quantity and cases you need to make for X particular product of beer, you can then utilize that information to understand, well, if it's a 14-day throughput for my fermentation, or 21 days, or what's going on based on the materials that are on hand, it's a pretty big matrix of understanding just what needs to be processed in that. And so in order to do that, production planning to become a reality, as you can tell, breweries need a central source of truth that combines together all of these different teams. And what that looks like is having the brewing, cellaring, packaging, and operations team, speaking with the lab and quality team, speaking with accounting, speaking with purchasing, with sales and logistics, right? Everything needs to be scheduled out, where if you're trying to get a particular seasonal beer onto shelves by December 1st, you need to make sure that you have those beers in tanks probably by early November, right? And so this is where that whole logistics side works across all these different departments. And now Beer 30 is basically a tool that's utilized to go everything from grain to glass, with everything from the base system of brewing process of scheduling and tasks, raw materials, yeast, and process, of getting into actual traceability and batch costing, sales, accounting integration, MRP, and then even looking at things like quality control, sales traceability in case of product recall, barrel aging, and getting into some other modules as well. And effectively, what this ends up doing is that from the Beer 30 perspective, Beer 30 on its own provides visibility when it comes to everything from inventory, which is everything from raw materials and packaging supplies, getting into material resource planning. So based on our schedules and tasks, you're able to actually plan out exactly which beers are going into which tanks, how many hectoliters, barrels, liters are going into that, and what the overall production output is going to be to know exactly by when you need to order particular ingredients of grains or packaging supplies. From there, you're able to get real-time data insights for brewing, fermenting, filter, bright tank package, even getting data alerts as things are deviating from different set points that are present. Getting into quality control side of things like lab data, micro, sensory, VDK, packaging carb data, things like that. Getting into cost of goods sold, COGS reports. But what's very interesting about Beer 30 compared to other softwares is that we actually focus in on the exact dollar value based on losses and yields. That gives you the overall cost of goods for each 24 pack of cans, bottles, kegs, etc. That then ties in with the sales and distribution and finished goods inventory, which we'll touch upon about how that ties in with the GP side here in a bit. But it's great because Beer 30 is tracking all the inventory that's available. You can then use this for warehouse tracking and moving stock of either raw materials or finished product between different locations, integrating each sales order or purchase orders with QuickBooks Online or Xero, getting into tax compliance and excise reporting, and then finally getting into demand planning, which really ties in with future forecasting for sales and raw materials to basically close that loop up. And what's really interesting about implementing Beer 30 is, again, most breweries are up running with a 90-minute brew process. But really, in terms of success, this is one thing I like to emphasize for anybody that's implementing something like Beer 30 or any software system as a whole, is to really set targets and goals with breakdowns of what success looks like. And what that means is really don't let perfection be the enemy of innovation, because many times we all go down this path of trying to come up with the perfect system, the perfect algorithm. But the goal here is, from our talk, is let's look at using Beer 30 and GP-Analytics to actually innovate something new for the entire craft beer industry and make some changes happening with demand planning and future forecasting. And so what that looks like is with brewery software systems, a 50% success rate is usually getting the whole streamlining of brew sheets, paper logs, whiteboards all into one system. 80% is then getting into everything for purchase orders, sales order, calculating cost of goods sold. 90% success is really getting that integration with QuickBooks Online and Xero. And then finally, the future forecasting and production planning is 100% mark. And so this is where this becomes a step-by-step syllabus for anybody watching this of how they can actually implement something like Beer 30 and GP-Analytics and basically build an entire portfolio up of what comes next of the Beer 30 side of things as well. And so with that, shifting gears, let's talk about how Beer 30 integrates with Craft Portal and VIP. And so with that, Bud, over to you.
So on the sales side, where we're starting with this integration is around sales order. So just like the screenshots that I showed where, hey, here's what my wholesalers want, looking at the right forecast, looking at the right order window and the right time, we're going to push those orders directly into Beer 30. So what that's going to do is help you cut down on time, on order entry, duplicate work, all that good stuff, and that order is going to pass over. And then PK actually runs with it from there and does a bunch of additional stuff, but beyond just that. I'm going to let you touch on PK.
Yeah, so pretty much what that looks like is with the Craft Portal, you're able to actually see, have distributors go directly into Craft Portal and make orders, which then feeds directly into the Beer 30 side of things. And then with Beer 30, you're able to see the exact stock on hand. You're able to print out the bill of ladings, get the actual purchase orders set up, get packing slips set up for your team. And then with that integration, you're also able to then have the Beer 30 side push the actual final invoices over to either QuickBooks Online and Xero. So that closes that entire supply chain part where in Beer 30, distributors can't actually make the orders directly, but using Craft Portal, all these distributors and VIP partners are able to actually log into Craft Portal see the stock that's available for them to sell based on warehouses and actually make that particular order directly there.
In addition to that, what we're also doing is we're passing over the forecasting into PK and his team. So then he can go through and do additional material resource planning and start to leverage the 12-week forecast that GP-Analytics comes up with and depletions out to even the 6 months, so that all the algorithmic forecasting feeds directly into your demand planning plan. So we're doing that pull model, that pull method. So we sell a case of beer out to retail. We see that that case of beer is sold. That sends that demand planning signal back to GP-Analytics. We rerun and re-optimize the algorithm, push that information to PK and his team and Beer 30. And then that says, ooh, ding, I need to order another mother case. I need to order another group of 6-pack carriers. I need to order this much grain, this much hops, all that other good stuff that all goes into the raw materials of making that product come to life and turning into a finished goods.
And that's really the key behind this, right? Is that if you're looking at this from an optimization perspective, the GP data set of 12 weeks and 6 months out is what's tying into the Beer 30 side to make sure that a brewery is never just sitting there with empty tanks, because they should have the raw materials and packaging supplies on hand. And that's really what the beauty of having somebody like Kona Brewing Hawai'i as a case study is, because they're all the way on islands where they can't just overnight something like a lot of people could, right? It's not that easy to overnight it. And if you can, it's not going to be cheap at all. And so that's kind of one of those aspects of this is a great case study of one of the hardest cases of trying to understand what can you do logistically when somebody is on the Hawaiian Islands.
100%. And all of this together, just as you can see, closes the loop and lets you use your current data to completely plan for where you want to be on projections going farther and farther out into the future. And PK, to your point around like brewers should never have tanks empty, like you're put on your consulting days hat, like brewers maximize their profit by taking advantage and running at max capacity as often as they can. So any downtime that you have related to poor planning is costing you money because you have that physical asset, that resource that's sitting there that's only turning profit when it's doing something.
Yep, exactly. And so that actually leads to a really cool aspect of the integration and practice, right? And so this entire loop is kind of what the big thing has been that both companies, Craft Portal and Beer 30, Fifth Ingredient, have really been focusing in on. And it's really using that data from VIP to actually close this loop and have Craft Portal be the conduit. So, Bud, I'll have you kind of go into this diagram a little bit, and we can touch base on this.
Yeah, so I'm going to start on the mid left side where we're looking at distributors and sales data. So your distributors and sales data are already being reported daily and nightly over to VIP. And what VIP is doing is then compiling all that information and presenting it back to you in the form of IDIG so you can search and understand what had happened in the past. What we're doing is we're going to take a same look at that information from a data perspective, and we're going to start to create projections based on forecasts and based on inventory, current inventory positions, which we talked about that earlier in the presentation. So the value proposition there is from an order management side, let's start to drive down the out of stock rate in the order behavior from the wholesalers. And that's where the bottom end on managing sales orders and forecasts on the bottom end of this chart really looks at, okay, right beer, right quantity, right place, right time. All that's right there. And where we go from there is let's pass that information to Beer 30 in the form of actual sales orders for accounting purposes and for bill of lading and everything else. But let's also pass that forecasting information for brew production planning and future MRP planning. So then if we make ourselves back all the way up to the top, now that the brewing plan is set, the right product is ready for those wholesalers at the right time. So we can take advantage of all those sales opportunities, not only with good order planning, but also with good production planning now and having the right beer ready to ship at the right time. We'll also take a little final allocation process. We know the world isn't perfect and that there are mistakes that happen. So if a yield doesn't wind up and isn't right, or if you have a supply chain breakdown where you don't have the right packaging in time, we look at the allocation process through the lens of forecast and available inventory, what your days of inventory at each wholesaler is, make those final little tweaks and adjustments, those actually repass back to beer 30, or if you make them vice versa, because it's a two-way sync. So they'll go back and forth together. So then accounting is always in step and your bill of ladings are always in step. And then that product's ultimately delivered, sales continue to happen. And we repeat this cycle over and over again. And what we notice with teams together that use this collectively and cohesively, they run this loop faster and faster together. The sales teams talking to the ops teams more often, and the logistics team, and even the accounting teams too. And it's bringing the platform of kind of independent silos, getting closer and closer and closer together and running the brewery together.
Yep. Awesome. That's a great way to emphasize this integration. And the best thing is that this is live, and breweries like Kona Hawaii are actually using this to actually help them on the day-to-day. And that actually is a great segue into our case study with Kona Brewing Hawai'i. And so what we'll be doing here is we'll be showing you an interview that we did with Jen and Nathalie, and really walking through exactly how Kona Brewing Hawai'i, I should say, is using both Beer 30 and the GP-Analytics portal and the impact that it has on them. Awesome. And so now we're going to shift into a case study with Kona Brewing Hawai'i. And so with us today, we have Jen Bush and Nathalie. And so if you could please give me some introductions, then let's get talking about the Beer 30 GP-Analytics integration for Kona Brewing Hawai'i.
Sure, happy to. My name is Jen Bush. I have been with Kona Brewing in Hawaii for off and on for 11 years. With our transition to being independently owned and locally managed, that's where we got involved with Beer 30. And Nathalie.
Yes. So I'm Nathalie Carisi, and I've joined the Kona Brewing Hawai'i team 4 months ago. And I've been very much involved in everything Beer 30 and GP-Analytics, and leveraging the systems to help us do what we want to do and what we need to do every day.
That's awesome. Thank you. So first question, I think, Jen, more so for you is, tell us about the transition from your previous ERP, what we're using to Beer 30, and then kind of as you're talking about that, what are the big changes in the process side, especially from your team and how they're acting with Beer 30 on a day-to-day basis, and what are some of the biggest benefits you've seen from the Beer 30 side of things?
So we were previously using orchestrated beer, and we had a couple of problems. One was that the brewers had not bought into the system. And so all of the data entry was being done by either finance or supply chain with not a lot of input from the brewers. And so we really weren't getting any synergies. We were taking their paper spreadsheets, or their paper logs, keying them, the transactions into OBeer, which was a very inefficient process. And I really didn't have the staff to support that system and for finance and supply chain to be logging everything that the brewers did. The thing that has really changed is that everybody is using Beer 30 every day. The brewers are in there every single day, managing their workflow, tracking all of this information that we in the past was just on a paper clipboard, and that we couldn't use that data. I think the other thing is that the brewers are entering real time, keeping up with their processing. And so we can see at what stage of the process are we at, what are the notes, what has changed. And we also have had a dynamic where now finance, supply chain, and the brewers are working together every day, answering questions, looking at the process, looking at the data, and talking to each other about what is happening on a day-to-day basis in the brewery. And that has been a game changer for us.
That's awesome. Thanks for explaining all of that. Bud, over to you from the GP side.
Yeah. So Jen, you said, we were not getting the synergies that we were looking for. So inspired by that thought process, or where you said you were not getting, how are you getting those synergies with the Craft Portal and the VIP data that Craft Portal uses and the forecasting? Why has that been impactful to the business on the sales side, and then also towards the production side too?
Maybe you want me to
maybe do the sales side first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit to that in terms. So being in supply chain, obviously I use these three systems. We're talking VIP, GP, and Beer 30. to try and balance demand and supply each and every day. So, in simple terms, just want to know what we need to build, what we need to brew and ship by when. So VIP data have been very important for me in terms of getting all of the sales to retailers information, the inventory information. GP gets me my forecast, gets me all of the sales order. Beer 30 gets me the supply side of things with production scheduling and so on and so forth. And it's been, really important tool, critical to what we're doing every day to make sure that we can build a master production schedule that we can execute to. In terms of how we get these systems together, for me, it's been, starting with the brewery, a lot of manual data pull to be able to get all of that information into one place, to be able to do the work that we need to do. And the integration that has been taken place between GP and Beer 30 and vice versa, and getting VIP data pushed into GP as well, has made that a lot easier for us to be able to do this balancing of demand and supply each and every day.
That's awesome. And y'all are still managing the supply chain. I want to make sure that the listeners understand that y'all are still bringing beer from the mainland out to the island.
Correct.
So in addition to producing locally and then shipping amongst all the Hawaiian Islands too.
Absolutely. So when we look at all the data in VIP and GP, where we're looking at daily rate of sales, the SDRs and the inventory, as well as the orders and the forecast, that gives us the view of what's needed at the distributor by when. So not only we're developing a master production schedule for the brewery here, but also a forecast that we can share with our contract brew partners on the mainland.
That's awesome. It's a lot long, we talk about data, using data smart to, shorten up supply chains. And that's what I see in action right here. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just had one more comment that the
please.
other thing with having, I mentioned that the synergies that we have by the brewers, finance, and supply chain working together. I think the VP or VIP and GP piece of it brings the sales team in as well. So the sales team is meeting with Nathalie, is talking to the brewers, and they're able to all be speaking the same language and looking at the same numbers.
That's awesome. So the sales team feels like they're out there selling beer, and the supply chain and the production team has the right beer ready at the right time to make those sales.
Exactly.
Just what we want. It's like we planned it, Jen, right? Like when we said, hey, let's talk to these Beer 30 guys, like this might make sense in the future.
Yeah.
Further into that integration, what other sides of this is beneficial? Like, are y'all seeing time savings in addition to everything we've talked about too on the synergy side?
So I would say for me, in terms of, again, balancing demand and supply each and every day, it's a lot of data pulls that we're still doing to try and map all of these systems together and get all of that information. And the work that we're doing with Ryan on this demand planning piece and forecasting out of Beer 30 is really going to be, and Jen said that word before, but it is going to be a game changer. The way that I'm looking at this is really in one system, I have all of the information that I'm trying to pull manually every day from the other system. Everything resides in one source, in one system, and that becomes my source system to build a master production schedule. So in terms of time saving, yes, I would say I spend a third to half of my time just making sure I get the right data every day to make the decisions we need to make. So it's not so much for me a time saving. Yes, there is a time saving, but it is the things that the opportunities that it gives us to do other things, right? So it's not only just, well, I won't have to pull the data and I will spend less time on data gathering, but it's really moving my focus from gathering the data, transforming the data, manipulating the data to really going into analytics and being able to run scenarios, simulation, looking at how the data tells me what we need to do and when we need to do it. And those are things today that I'm not able to do. And so it's not really just the time saving, but it's the things that I'm going to be able to do with having this information at the click of a button.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this whole integration that we're doing between Beer 30 and GP-Analytics and VIP. The benefit of that, Nathalie, is exactly what you're talking about, is now you can actually do something powerful with the data. And otherwise, it would just be sitting around in a bunch of paper logs, spreadsheets. Somebody would have to go in and get it. And I guess just to wrap this up then, how does that then tie in from, I guess, the day-to-day operations when it comes to the actual brewing side, right? So how does this tie in with forecasting and knowing the amount of grains that you have on hand, or packaging supplies or things? How does that piece tie in with this loop to make sure that you're always on top of your actual orders themselves?
And I would go even further than that, is really not just the brewery, but our partners. So when we look at how we're forecasting and bringing this forecasting to beer 30, getting into a master production scheduling. So looking at the demand planning, doing a master production scheduling, translating that into a production schedule and an MRP is really giving the brewery what it needs to be done each and every day. It's giving our partners, whether they are the raw material suppliers, they are packaging suppliers, or they are even our freight forwarders, what will happen each and every day. We can give them the visibility over multiple weeks of what is the plan. And we're all working to the same consensus, if you will, knowing what needs to happen. And here in Hawaii, as you can imagine, we don't have access to, containers and chassis and all of these things that
you can't just overnight grains or hops from the mainland.
So giving this visibility is super important. And everything that we ship via ocean. So giving this visibility to our partners, not just to the brewers here at the brewery, is critical.
That's amazing. Perfect. That's it on my end. Jen, Nathalie, anything else you'd like to add, or Bud, anything on your end?
No, we just appreciate the great job that you guys are doing. And all of our other software vendors are really sad that we're working with you, because you guys are so responsive, and we really appreciate you're making our business better.
Yeah, the collaboration has been amazing for sure.
We just really appreciate it. And everybody here knows who Pulkit is, and everybody, it's just been great as we onboard more brewers and we have more access, more people with access and more understanding. I think that it's just going to continue to get better.
I love it. Well, I think you ladies should be proud of all the work you do, because as much of work as PK and the teams can do together to create software and have it integrate together and have it work, we need smart folks on the ground that are operating our clients' businesses to actually put the ideas to work and actually expand on them. Say, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And your crew is taking us to task, and is also taking, what tools we have built to task, and is expanding the use cases infinitely. So y'all should be proud of the great work that y'all doing too. It's mutual respect and mutual admiration on this call right now, for sure.
It's really the feedback that drives our entire product roadmap when it comes to improving it for end users, right? And the fact that you both are very involved along with the rest of your team, and sending us messages on WhatsApp, sending out emails when things need some work or tweaking on, it's awesome, because it keeps us on top of our game as well.
Yep.
Much appreciated.
Well,
one day, hopefully,
everyone.
we'll all be in the same room and be able to share a beer.
Let's do it. Game plan for 2023. Let's do it.
2023 dive trip, Hawaii.
There you go. Awesome. Yep. And so to wrap things up, let's connect, right? And so with that, here's some of our information that's there. If you're interested, I'll speak for the Beer 30 side first. If you're interested in a demo of Beer 30, feel free to reach out directly to me. My email is there, pka@thefifthingredient.com. Also visit us on the website, www.thefifthingredient.com, and feel free to reach out and let's talk about how Beer 30 can really help streamline everything that's happening on the brewing process side for your brewery.
And in the same token, for me, if you're interested in Craft Portal, you can reach out to me, bud@gp-analytics.com, and our website is gp-analytics.com to check us out. PK and I do collaborative meetings too. So if you want to talk together, you want to see how these two things work, interacted together, we're happy to do that. We also know just enough about each other's businesses to be dangerous. Not enough for me to give a tour of Beer 30. PK, you might know enough to give a tour of Craft Portal, just really close. You got a lot more modules and things going on than we do. So, but we can at least sit down together at a minimum, kind of talk through in further detail how to position this integration in your operation that's unique in the value propositions from what you learned today too.
Yeah, and the best part about this is that as we get into some of these meetings, we'll also be able to walk you through the ROI on this, right? And the ROI 100%. From the Beer 30 side, the ROI from the Craft Portal side, and then when you integrate that together, that any brewery in the industry that's doing anything when it comes to future planning, when it comes to demand planning, production, and doing the whole optimization of scheduling, needs a system like this. Otherwise, you're literally leaving hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars on the table annually just because things aren't working as smoothly as they could be, right? And that's really where our vision comes in together between both Craft Portal and Beer 30 of changing the industry and making something happen where it goes full stack and it's helping all of these breweries really realize their values and their benefits from grain to glass tracking.
100%.
Cool.
Well, I think with that, thanks everybody for joining us today. We appreciate it, PK. Thanks for all the work you did with me to pull this together. Big props to Jen and Natalie for joining us today as well. So thanks everybody. We'll talk soon, and cheers. So have a great new year.
Yeah. Cheers, everyone. Have a great one. Bye.